Divorced while 8 months pregnant and scorned for a poverty that was only a facade, all for the sake of her own sister. Amelia just smiled coldly. But hold your breath. The moment her true identity was revealed and she brutally bankrupted them right in the middle of their lavish wedding reception was the most satisfying financial karma of the year. For those who have subscribed, may your fortunes be ever flowing. Amen. Here is her story. My name is Amelia Warren, and at 30 years old, my true profession is that of a senior independent forensic auditor and the secret majority shareholder of Apex Dynamics Incorporated. But if you were to see me tonight, you would only see a pathetic, 8 months pregnant woman wearing a faded floral house dress, standing in the corner of a kitchen in a luxurious Manhattan townhouse that was, ironically, the golden cage of my own creation. I designed this stage of deception years ago to test the man I married, letting him feel like a king on a throne I had secretly built for him. My husband, Ryan Prescott, was the chief operating officer at the company where I had invested a colossal sum through an anonymous holding company. In his eyes, and the world's, he was a self-made business genius who had built his career from nothing. In reality, he was the worst investment I had ever made. His arrogance perfectly masked his incompetence. Lately, he had begun to look at me as if I were a pile of expired documents, a heavy burden with a swollen belly that was no longer pleasant to look at, let alone bring to the high society galas that had become his new obsession. In his eyes, I was just a deeply embarrassing past. Amelia, can't you even make a proper cup of tea? This is far too sweet. No wonder you're blowing up like a balloon. The shrill voice of Linda, my mother-in-law, shattered my calculated thoughts from the other end of the kitchen. She was sitting in the living room, showing off a counterfeit Hermes bag she'd bought with the leftover monthly allowance I provided through Ryan's account. Linda was an old woman obsessed with status, who valued social standing above all else. To her, I was just a useless, poor girl. She had no idea that the Italian leather sofa she was currently sitting on was paid for directly from my personal stock portfolio. However, tonight was no ordinary night for this family. There was a special guest sitting with her long legs crossed, an expression of nauseating arrogance on her face. It was Sarah, my own younger sister. Only 27 years old, Sarah was the very definition of a parasite. Ever since we were teenagers, she had always demanded a twisted form of justice where whatever I had, she must have too. Tonight, she was wearing a glittering diamond necklace that I recognized instantly. It was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, purchased with a corporate credit card whose transactions had already appeared on the radar of my private forensic audit. I walked out of the kitchen, carrying a wooden tray of tea with difficulty due to my burgeoning belly. Each step felt heavy, but inside, my brain was working 1,000 times faster than any supercomputer. I placed the tray gently on the glass coffee table. Just then, Ryan walked into the living room. He had just come home from work. His expensive, tailored suit was immaculate, but the cheap perfume clinging to his collar was the exact same scent Sarah was wearing. "Sit down, Amelia. There's something important I need to discuss," Ryan said, his voice as cold as the marble floor beneath my feet. There was no warm greeting for his wife, who was carrying his own child. He sat down right next to Sarah, their proximity far too close and intimate for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. "What is it, Ryan?" I asked softly, carefully modulating my tone to sound weak and submissive, playing my role as the foolish wife to flawless perfection. Ryan pulled a thick manila envelope from his briefcase and tossed it onto the table with a demeaning flick of his wrist. It slid smoothly across the glass and stopped right in front of my stomach. "Those are divorce papers. I've already signed them. I want to separate. Now. Amelia, I can't continue this pathetic marriage with you any longer." The room fell suddenly silent, a cruel, unspoken agreement hanging in the air. Linda sipped her tea with a faint smile she couldn't hide. Sarah pretended to be engrossed in her freshly manicured red nails, but the corner of her mouth twitched, holding back a wild laugh of victory. I stared at the envelope for a moment, then looked directly into my husband's face. "You're really divorcing me when I'm 8 months pregnant with your child, Ryan?" What's your reason? I deliberately made my voice tremble, a stellar performance that should have made anyone with a shred of conscience feel disgusted with themselves. Because I never loved you, Amelia, Ryan answered without a hint of hesitation, his voice radiating the pride of an arrogant man who believed he controlled the world. Our marriage was a huge mistake from the start. My heart wasn't for you. It has always been for Sarah. That sentence was meant to shatter me. But inside my head, those disgusting words were merely another variable in the deadly mathematical equation I was in the process of solving. Ryan intentionally turned to my sister, taking her hand in front of me, right in front of his own mother, who was now smiling with pride. Sarah finally dared to look at me. Her eyes shone with the absolute satisfaction of a cheap homewrecker who felt she had just won the biggest trophy of her life. I'm sorry, Amelia, but Ryan and I have loved each other since high school. We dated in secret. We were each other's first love. You were just a temporary distraction while Ryan built his career from the ground up. Now that he's successful, we deserve to be happy together. That's right, Linda chimed in, placing her teacup down on the table with a clatter. Ryan needs a wife who can match his status as a COO. A wife who is beautiful, elegant, modern. Someone who can be taken to high society parties, not a woman in a frumpy house dress whose only job is in the kitchen. Sarah is far more deserving of being Mrs. Prescott. Besides, you've just been a freeloader in my son's luxurious house all this time. The disgusting truth was finally served up perfectly tonight. My own sister was apparently my husband's ex-girlfriend from high school. They had been carrying on behind my back all this time, laughing at my fictional stupidity, patiently waiting for the moment Ryan felt wealthy enough to throw me onto the street. Ryan was so proud of having Sarah as his mistress, feeding her from the same plate I used. Then what about me? Ryan, what about the fate of this child? I asked softly, forcing a single tear to fall down my cheek. That's entirely your problem, Ryan replied with chilling coldness. I'll give you a severance package sufficient for your delivery costs after you give birth. I am ordering you to get out of this house forever. Sarah will be moving in next week. We're going to completely redecorate the master bedroom. The three of them expected me to break down sobbing, to crawl and beg at Ryan's feet, or to scream and hysterically tear at Sarah's hair. They truly believed the pregnant woman before them was utterly helpless and would be completely destroyed tonight. They were dead wrong. Behind my fake tears, I was accurately calculating the flow of illegal auto-debit funds that Ryan had transferred to my sister Sarah's account. I was precisely weighing the articles of the civil lawsuit that would soon impoverish him to his very core. I felt no heartbreak whatsoever. I felt pure, unadulterated disgust. I was so tired of the cheap drama played by these petty parasites. This luxurious house, the imported marble floors they stood on so arrogantly, the stolen jewelry worth hundreds of thousands around my sister's neck. It was all 100% mine. Ryan was just a low-level employee whom I had intentionally given the hollow title of COO so his fragile male ego wouldn't be bruised. All right, Ryan, I answered, my voice barely a whisper. I slowly wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I picked up a silver pen from the table, bent down carefully, and signed the divorce papers without a shred of hesitation. Ryan seemed a little surprised at how easily his wife had given up. However, his ego quickly dismissed the strange inconsistency. Sarah and Linda immediately exchanged a look of triumph. They were certain they had just kicked a poor parasite out onto the cold street. I turned my body slowly and walked back towards the kitchen, leaving them to laugh freely as they planned their grand future in my own house. As I silently caressed my stomach, an ice-cold, cynical smile finally spread across my lips. Have fun tonight, Ryan, Sarah, and Linda. My mind spoke into the deadly silence. Enjoy the last remnants of your fleeting, illusory wealth, because tomorrow morning, I, the executioner, will ensure that the three of you are weeping in a dilapidated shack that smells of a rotten sewer, forever recorded as historical trash in every financial institution in this country. The master bedroom door closed softly behind me, followed by the cold, metallic click of a double lock. Instantly, My posture, which had been slumped like an oppressed wife's, straightened perfectly. The manufactured tears that had welled in my eyes dried without a trace. There were no sobs, no dramatic slide to the floor, and certainly no wallowing in self-pity on the bed. This room was soundproof, an architectural feature I had deliberately designed not for luxury, but for absolute privacy. I walked over to the large mirror in the corner, staring at my reflection in the faded floral house dress. This outfit was merely a stage costume, a highly effective camouflage for blinding an arrogant man and a greedy mother-in-law. With a single calm movement, I took off the dress and replaced it with a thick, elegant black silk robe. I caressed my 8-month belly. Don't be afraid, little one. Your mother is not a weak woman who lets parasites take over our palace. I walked towards the massive teak bookshelf that covered one entire wall. Behind a row of thick encyclopedias that Ryan had never touched, he was too lazy to read, was a retinal scanning panel. I stared straight into the small, hidden lens. A green light blinked silently. The wooden wall slid open smoothly, revealing a secret home office, about 10 by 10 feet, filled with dual monitor displays, a private cloud server, and a steel safe containing the authentic deeds to all my anonymous holding companies. This was my real world. The executioner's command center. I sat down in the ergonomic leather chair and powered on my super-encrypted laptop, which had direct access to the financial heart of Apex Dynamics Incorporated, the company where my clueless husband thought he was king. Ryan Prescott had always boasted about his position as COO, thinking the title was the result of his own hard work. In truth, I had given him that seat purely to satisfy his male ego while keeping him under my surveillance. But tonight, he had crossed the line. My fingers danced across the keyboard, entering a series of top-level authorization codes. I initiated a comprehensive forensic audit, combing through every line item, every transaction, and every approval log involving the name Ryan Prescott for the past 3 years. My husband might have a handsome face and a silver tongue, but he was an absolute fool when it came to digital footprints. The first monitor displayed the company's operational cash flow chart, while the second began filtering for suspicious transactions hidden under fictitious vendor expenses. My eyes narrowed as the AI system I had designed myself detected a recurring anomaly. The pattern was neat, but primitive enough for a financial expert like me. Ryan had set up a covert auto-debit system. On the 15th of every month, right after the company's main project funds were dispersed, a fantastically large sum of money was automatically transferred to a shell corporation named Radiant Solutions, LLC. Of course, it didn't take me long to dismantle the layers of that sham company. Within seconds, the name of the ultimate beneficiary account owner was displayed in bright, bold letters on my screen. Sarah, my own sister, the cheap homewrecker who had been sitting in my living room, flaunting a diamond necklace bought with stolen money. I traced the transactions in Sarah's account with a cynical smile that grew wider. This wasn't just pocket money for designer bags or overseas vacations. The largest transaction had occurred 6 months ago, right after I had announced my pregnancy to Ryan. A massive withdrawal, classified as payment for a real estate asset. A sum of $5.5 million had been withdrawn in stages to pay off a luxury penthouse in an elite Upper East Side neighborhood, all legally registered in Sarah's name. Ryan had arrogantly bought my sister a magnificent penthouse using money from my own company, right at the time my belly began to grow with his child. They were laughing and making love on an expensive bed bought with my sweat, planning their future after I was kicked out of the house that was also mine from the very beginning. The sheer absurdity of it almost made me laugh out loud, a cold, deadly laugh. Ryan thought he was the apex predator, when in reality, he was just dancing in the palm of my hand. "You are such a foolish man, Ryan," I whispered to the blinking monitor. "You left a digital trail the size of an elephant in the middle of the room, and you thought your freeloader wife would never find out." I printed out all the evidence. The transfer slips, the illegal auto-debit documents, and the deed to Sarah's penthouse. The papers slid out of the printer with a soft hiss, each sheet a golden ticket to their financial hell. This evidence was more than enough to send Ryan to prison for corporate embezzlement. But prison was too easy. Prison still gave him a roof over his head and free meals. I wanted a suffering that was far more elegant, something that would crush their souls. I wanted absolute destruction. I reached for the satellite phone in my drawer and dialed a special number I used only for emergencies. The line rang twice before a deep, professional voice answered. "Good evening, Mrs. Warren. How may I assist you?" It was Harrison Vance, the most cutthroat corporate lawyer under an exclusive contract with my holding company. "Evening, Harrison." "It's time to work," I said flatly. "Prepare a civil lawsuit against Ryan Prescott. Sue him for corporate embezzlement of $5.5 million, plus punitive damages for emotional distress. At 10 times that amount, I want you to prepare the framework for a forced asset liquidation." "Understood, ma'am. When do we execute?" "Wait for my signal. Let them have their cheap wedding first. I want to seize that penthouse and strip all of Sarah's jewelry off her right in front of their wedding guests. Also, make sure you coordinate with the credit bureaus. The moment I give the order, I want all accounts in the names of Ryan Prescott and Sarah Warren frozen instantly. Get them blacklisted by every financial institution without a single loophole. A perfect scenario, ma'am. I'll handle the seizure warrants tonight." "One more thing, Harrison," I added, my gaze sharpening on the files on my desk. "Prepare a top-tier security team. During the execution, I don't want a single item from my house taken by them. They are to leave my palace with only the clothes on their backs. I want to see them begging on the streets and ending up in a dilapidated shack on the outskirts of the city. Of course, ma'am, I will ensure they become the most pathetic vagrants in this city." I disconnected the call. My office was silent once again. I leaned back in my leather chair, feeling a small kick from the baby inside me. I caressed him gently. From this moment on, the role of the oppressed, foolish wife was officially erased behind these walls. There would be no mercy for traitors. Ryan, Sarah, and the greedy Linda had chosen their own path to become parasites. And as the rightful owner of the garden, it was my duty to rip them out by the roots and burn them to ash. I would let them soar high on the illusion of success I had built before I finally clipped their wings. They would soon be recorded as nothing more than historical trash, never to rise again. The morning sun pierced through the silk curtains of the main dining room, illuminating the long Italian marble table. I descended the stairs slowly, deliberately wearing the same faded house dress from the night before. There were slight dark circles under my eyes, not from crying over my failed marriage, but from spending the entire night formulating a civil lawsuit that would bankrupt them all to the point of no return. At the dining table, the cheap comedy had already begun. Ryan Prescott sat at the head of the table, a chair I had actually bought with dividends from my stock portfolio. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit, looking arrogant and supremely confident. To his right sat Sarah, my sister and the shameless homewrecker. She was spreading jam on a piece of toast for my husband, acting as if she were already the rightful lady of the house. And, of course, at the corner of the table, Linda was busy admiring the gold ring on her finger, giving me the same condescending look I knew so well. "Sit down, Amelia," Ryan commanded without looking at me, his eyes glued to the smart tablet in his hand. I pulled out the farthest chair and sat in silence, holding my belly. I had my lawyer draft the final documents. "We agreed last night. Now I need your signature in black and white." Ryan slid a thin folder towards me. It glided across the table and stopped in front of my empty plate. "A divorce settlement agreement." I glanced over the points. It was heavily skewed in his favor, of course. He was offering a severance for childbirth that wasn't even 10% of my daily capital gains on the stock market. "Don't take too long reading it, Amelia. You wouldn't understand the legal jargon anyway." Linda sneered with a small laugh. "Just sign it. Ryan is being very generous, giving you any money at all. If I were him, I'd have thrown you out without a penny. You need to know your place. You've just been a freeloader, living off my son's luxury. You're nothing more than a parasite in this family." Sarah chimed in with a cloying voice that made me want to vomit. "Yes, Amelia, You should be grateful Ryan is still willing to pay for your delivery. If you need extra money for baby formula, just let me know. I can spare some from my shopping budget. Besides, Ryan and I are planning to renovate the master bedroom for our wedding. So, you should start packing your things now. I looked at the three faces, filled with disgusting arrogance. They truly believed I was a foolish woman with nothing to my name. Sarah felt proud offering me formula money from her shopping budget, not realizing that the money she used was the result of illegal auto debits from my company's coffers. She thought she was a queen, when in fact she was just a parasite sucking the blood of her own sister. Is this your final decision, Ryan? I asked, my tone flat, keeping my expression looking dumb and resigned. You're really throwing out your pregnant wife for her own sister? Ryan put down his tablet and looked at me, his eyes narrowed with hubris. Listen, Amelia, the business world is tough. I need a partner who represents my success. Sarah is a high-class woman. She understands my lifestyle. She can mingle with the wives of other executives. You, on the other hand, can't even tell a salad fork from a dinner fork. I'm sick of seeing you wandering around my house in that hick dress. Sign the papers. And after the child is born, you need to leave. My house, he'd said. This man's arrogance had completely blinded his reason. He had forgotten that the deed to this 10,000-square-foot property was registered under a holding company that I controlled 100%. He had no idea that in a matter of days, I would use my absolute veto power on the board of directors to strip him of his position in the most humiliating way possible. Without another word, I picked up the pen lying next to the folder with a slow, measured movement. I placed my signature on the line above the notary seal. That signature was not an admission of defeat. It was a financial death sentence for Ryan Prescott. I pushed the folder back towards Ryan. He took it with a satisfied smile, as if he had just won a billion-dollar contract. Good, he said, putting the document in his briefcase. Starting today, you sleep in the downstairs guest room. I don't want to see you on the second floor again. And remember, don't even think about causing trouble, or I'll make sure you don't get a single cent from me. Oh, Ryan, I don't want a single cent from you. I'm going to take everything, right down to the last shred of your dignity. I stood up slowly, supporting my aching back. Fine, Ryan. If that's what you want, I'll move to the guest room. I hope you'll be very happy with your wedding plans. I turned and walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard Linda's satisfied laughter as she praised Ryan for his decisiveness in getting rid of the trash from their house. Sarah was cooing, talking about the fitting for her luxurious wedding gown she had scheduled for that afternoon at a famous designer's boutique, using a credit card that was about to be declined into oblivion. Let them party. Let them spend that stolen money today. Because every dollar they swiped was being meticulously recorded in my private forensic audit as additional evidence of corporate embezzlement. I, the executioner, had finalized the entire framework. When the asset liquidation was executed, Ryan wouldn't just lose his job. All the phantom stocks and options he was so proud of would be converted into toxic assets with zero market value. His name would be permanently enshrined on every credit bureau's blacklist as a corporate fugitive who could never open a bank account again for the rest of his life. And Sarah, my money-grubbing sister, would be forcibly evicted from her luxury penthouse without mercy. I couldn't wait to see Linda's arrogant face when she had to pack up her fake designer goods and realize she no longer had a roof over her head. I would throw the three of them into a dilapidated shack in the deepest corner of the city, where the stench of the sewer would become Sarah's new perfume, replacing her expensive fragrance. The climax of their destruction was already set in my mind. The day Ryan and Sarah celebrated their lavish wedding would be the day I formalized their new status as homeless individuals with no dignity left. They thought they had thrown me away, making me a piece of forgotten history. In reality, they were the ones walking blindfolded towards the most brutal abyss of bankruptcy. My move to the downstairs guest room was a satirical comedy I enjoyed in silence. The room was a third the size of the master suite, with no large windows overlooking the pool, and furnished with only stiff, standard pieces. Perfect. This cramped space put me far from Ryan's arrogant gaze and Linda's shrill insults. With my belly growing larger, I dragged a small suitcase containing my disguise, including the faded house dresses that had become my uniform as an oppressed and helpless wife. I deliberately left my expensive designer gowns in the upstairs closet, letting Sarah, the cheap homewrecker, greedily pillage them like a starving dog that had found leftover bones. From a small crack in the guest room door, I watched them leave this morning. Ryan looked so dashing in his sunglasses, his arm wrapped around Sarah's waist as she swayed seductively. My sister was wearing a fiery red silk dress, carrying a limited edition Chanel bag that I knew for a fact was bought with stolen money. "Use my black card to pay the down payment for the catering and the venue today, darling," Ryan said loudly, intentionally raising his voice so his arrogant words would echo to me. "Choose the most expensive and exclusive vendors. A COO's wife can't look cheap on her wedding day." "Thank you so much, Ryan. I'll make sure our wedding is the event of the year," Sarah shrieked with glee, kissing my husband's cheek without a hint of shame. They laughed freely, walking towards the gleaming European sports car parked in the garage. Linda waved from the porch, giving her proud blessing to the two parasites who truly believed they had conquered the world. Fools. As soon as the roar of the luxury car faded, and Linda was engrossed in her morning soap opera in the living room, I locked the guest room door. I activated a portable signal jammer, no bigger than a matchbox, to ensure there were no listening devices in the room. My super-encrypted laptop hummed to life, casting a blue glow on my face, displaying a black interface with lines of dynamic green code. It was time to shut down their fake life support system, time for the executioner to work in the shadows. My first target was the real estate infrastructure, the luxurious townhouse Linda was currently occupying, and the magnificent penthouse Sarah inhabited on the Upper East Side. Both were registered under a subsidiary of mine, Warren Holdings. My fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing an international legal portal synchronized with a central bank in Switzerland. With just 3 clicks of multi-layered authorization, I transferred the ownership deeds of both multi-million-dollar assets into a secret blind trust based in the Cayman Islands. A legal fortress, there were no loopholes for marital asset claims, no room for seizure by any bank in Ryan's name. This house was now absolutely and legally untouchable, belonging to my heir, the baby in my womb. Second target, the financial bloodline. I opened the forensic audit panel from the bank's database that managed Apex Dynamics operational accounts. Ryan had been heavily reliant on the illegal auto-debit system he manipulated through a fictitious vendor loophole to regularly fund Sarah's account. I didn't just cut off the money flow that was too simple and would make him suspicious too early. I did something far more lethal. I triggered a high-level security protocol. I injected a special algorithm that would categorize all future transactions from Ryan's black card as fraudulent and money laundering activities. However, I left its verification status pending in the bank's queuing system. This meant Sarah could still swipe that card arrogantly today at a diamond boutique or a 5-star catering vendor. The transaction would show as pending on the machine, and she would assume it was successful. But eventually, at the end of the month's billing cycle, the gigantic bill would explode into Ryan's personal debt, which no one could pay. My husband's treasured black card had officially been turned into a toxic asset. My satellite phone vibrated softly on the table. Harrison Vance, my unfailing primary lawyer. "Status report." "Harrison," I said coldly, my eyes fixed on my personal stock portfolio chart, which continued to climb. "Everything is proceeding with precision according to your instructions." "Mrs. Warren." Harrison's baritone voice was calm, yet deadly. "The draft of the civil suit for sustained corporate fund misappropriation by Ryan Prescott is 100% complete. The claim is for $25 million, covering all material losses, the freezing of phantom assets, and punitive damages. It's quite satisfying. And his position on the board of directors? I've scheduled an emergency shareholders meeting. As the anonymous majority shareholder, you will exercise your absolute veto power. The letter of termination for cause, without severance, is already printed on my desk. We are simply awaiting your instruction to execute the full asset liquidation on the big night. I smiled faintly, a smile devoid of warmth, reflecting pure, calculated satisfaction. And what about the accumulated dividends and capital gains from our shares in Apex Dynamics? Will you be liquidating those today, ma'am? Harrison asked. Reinvest it all into a trust for my child. Ryan has zero access to it. He thinks he's the powerful primary breadwinner, but his salary as a puppet COO isn't even enough to cover the annual property taxes on one of my estates, I replied flatly. And the final blow to their identities? Ma'am? Ensure our partner banks issue the official account freezes immediately. When I drop the bomb on their wedding day, I want Ryan Prescott and Sarah Warren to be officially on every credit bureau's blacklist. They called me a freeloader, a parasite. I will show them what happens when the host tree they've been sucking dry turns out to be poisonous. And their physical assets? The clothes, the car, the stolen jewelry. Seize it all. Brutally. Right in front of their wedding guests. I want Linda to witness with her own eyes how her daughter-in-law is stripped of her finery. After that, dump them in a dilapidated shack by the train tracks. Let their arrogant bodies smell the sewer every morning. I want them to be vagrants, weeping over their fate as historical trash. Orders received with absolute clarity. Mrs. Warren, the line went dead. I closed my laptop. The freezing process was complete. The financial bloodline that had fueled Ryan's arrogance and Sarah's greed was now completely severed, though they didn't realize it yet. Like a person whose artery has just been sliced by a transparent blade, their bodies could still dance and party on the remaining dregs of their pride before they finally collapsed, gasping for the breath of reality. Their wedding reception was about to become the grandest funeral for their own self-respect. 3 weeks had passed since I signed those divorce papers. This luxurious house, the palace I had built with sweat and high-level stock portfolio manipulation, had now been completely transformed into a cheap circus. From behind the guest room door, which I kept slightly ajar, I observed the hustle and bustle of preparations for my husband's wedding to my own sister. I was still faithfully wearing the faded floral house dress, now stretched tightly over my large belly, playing the nauseating role of a helpless woman about to be humiliatingly kicked onto the street. In the living room, the shrill laughter of Sarah and Linda echoed, drowning out the sound from the 100-inch flat-screen TV. The room was now filled with stacks of boxes from high-end European designers. Sarah, the homewrecker drunk on an illusion of power, sat amidst a sea of luxury goods, like a queen who had just conquered a great kingdom. Look at this French silk wedding gown, Mom. It cost almost $100,000. Sarah shrieked with glee, holding up a shimmering white dress adorned with a cascade of dazzling Swarovski crystals. Ryan told me to swipe his black card with no limit. He said our wedding has to be the most magnificent event of the year. Not a single guest should dare to look down on the new director's wife. Linda nodded proudly, her eyes gleaming greedily at the pile of ill-gotten goods. Of course, dear. Ryan is a successful man, my brilliant COO. He deserves to be with a high-class woman like you, not some country bumpkin whose only job is to freeload in this mansion. Linda deliberately raised her voice on the last sentence, casting a cynical glare towards my room. I closed the door softly. In the silence of my room, a cold, asymmetrical smile formed on my lips. They were true parasites. Pathetic creatures who felt powerful just by borrowing the credit card of a man who was, in reality, a low-level pawn in my own company. I walked slowly to the small desk in the corner and turned on my trusty super-encrypted laptop. The monitor cast a blue glow, reflecting my face, now devoid of any mercy. I opened the banking surveillance system linked directly to Apex Dynamics' primary database. A pop-up window appeared, showing a real-time list of red numbers that kept increasing. It was the transaction history of Ryan Prescott's prized black card. $100,000 for a wedding gown. $50,000 for a 5-star hotel ballroom rental. $30,000 for a premium catering vendor. And most shockingly, a cash withdrawal of $150,000 to furnish the new Upper East Side penthouse, the magnificent property previously bought through their ridiculous illegal auto-debit scheme. My fingers tapped slowly on the desk as their phantom debt grew. Every time a credit card machine printed a receipt, my system immediately copied the data as legally admissible evidence. Ryan was truly the most clueless man I had ever met. He thought the corporate black card was a bottomless well, a gift from the board of directors for his performance. He had no idea that the bank's security system, which I had manipulated, was deliberately allowing all transactions to show as approved at the register, while holding them firmly at the main clearing gate. The company's money never actually went out to pay for their luxuries. Instead, my banking algorithm converted every swipe Sarah made into a high-interest personal loan in Ryan Prescott's name. That black card was a toxic asset slowly strangling them. Every one of Sarah's happy laughs while holding a new designer bag, and every one of Linda's compliments on the expensive truffle dishes was another nail hammered into their financial coffin. Towards evening, Ryan came home with an infuriatingly arrogant look on his face. He strode in like a Roman emperor returning from a great victory. The smell of masculine cologne mixed with expensive cigars emanated from him. Sarah immediately threw herself into his arms, showering him with playful kisses in front of Linda, who just smiled broadly in approval. "How was the shopping today, darling? Did you get everything you wanted for our big day?" Ryan asked in a contrived baritone, possessively stroking my sister's back. "Perfect, Ryan. All the best vendors are paid in full. My dress, the magnificent venue, the exclusive catering, it's all done. You're the most amazing husband in the world," Sarah cooed, resting her head on Ryan's chest. I came out of the guest room to get a glass of water from the kitchen, dragging my feet, playing the part of an exhausted, depressed, pregnant woman to perfection. Ryan glanced at me out of the corner of his eye and snorted dismissively, as if seeing a fly disturbing his view. "Good to see you've started packing up your junk, Amelia," Ryan scolded with a freezing tone as I passed the dining room. "My wedding to Sarah is in 3 days. After that grand event, I don't want to see your face in this house again. I'll transfer your severance money early next month. Go find some cheap rental that suits your social class." I bowed my head deeply, hiding the murderous glint in my eyes. "Yes, Ryan, I understand," I answered in a barely audible, deliberately shaky voice. "You never deserved to be in our elite circle. Have some self-awareness, you parasite," Linda added with a harsh snort before heading upstairs, followed by condescending laughter from Sarah and Ryan. I returned to my room, drinking the water with a deadly, absolute calm. Their cheap insults were the most beautiful lullaby for me tonight. My private forensic audit report was now hundreds of pages thick, detailing every one of Ryan's financial sins down to the last cent. They didn't know that in the steel safe behind the library wall, a $25 million civil lawsuit was already printed, ready to be filed in the commercial court. They were also completely unaware that I, the shadow executioner they deemed so weak, held the absolute veto power from the chairman's seat to fire Ryan Prescott for cause, without a single penny of compensation. On the climactic night, just as that $100,000 gown was wrapped around Sarah's body on the altar, I would arrive with a storm of asset liquidation that would wipe out the very foundation of their pride. I would stand tall, emotionless, and watch them be forcibly ejected from that 5-star hotel by security. Ryan Prescott's name would be instantly thrown onto every credit blacklist, shattering his career and financial future to pieces. The multi-million-dollar capital gains I would make tomorrow on the stock market would be something they could never even taste a drop of. Enjoy your lavish, illusion-filled party, you traitors, because after the glittering lights of that hotel ballroom are forcibly extinguished, your new home will be a dilapidated shack in a dusty corner of the city. You will wake up to the smell of a sewer assaulting your lungs, sleeping on used cardboard boxes as vagrants with no direction in life. And in the dark history of this family, your names will only be remembered as trash, utterly destroyed by your own stupidity and greed. You have only 3 days left to breathe easy. The afternoon sun scorched the city asphalt, as if celebrating the final day of Ryan Prescott's illusory life of luxury. At home, The three parasites were busy pampering themselves. Ryan had booked an exclusive in-home massage service, while Sarah, the cheap homewrecker, and Linda spent their time at a VIP salon for pre-wedding treatments. They thought I was holed up in the guest room, crying over my fate as a discarded woman freeloading in their palace. In reality, I had just stepped out of the private elevator lobby of my holding company's skyscraper. The 50th floor conference room was soundproof and lined with bulletproof glass. Across the black marble table sat Harrison Vance, my primary lawyer, along with two senior notaries sworn to protect my identity's confidentiality. On the table lay a neat stack of thick folders that would serve as a maximum impact time bomb for Ryan and Sarah's future. All documents have been legally verified, Mrs. Warren, Harrison said, sliding a red-covered folder towards me. This is the file for the civil suit for misappropriation of corporate funds, complete with the forensic audit evidence of the illegal auto-debit transfers to Sarah Warren's account. I opened the folder. The rows of numbers and layered legal clauses were beautifully arranged, far more enchanting than the $100,000 wedding gown my sister was currently adoring. The claim for punitive damages and asset seizure was approved by the commercial court this morning. The total liability Ryan Prescott must pay is $25 million, and since you've converted all the credit cards he used to finance tomorrow's party into toxic assets, his personal debt to the bank will explode tonight, Harrison explained with deadly precision, his eyes filled with a deep respect reserved only for an apex predator in the corporate food chain. I slid my index finger over the transaction details. Each page was a manifestation of my husband's stupidity. Ryan had no idea that his signature on every catering, decoration, and dress bill was actually a signature on an unsecured, maximum interest loan agreement. Checkmate. I took my favorite gold pen. With a single, firm, unbroken line, I affixed my signature above the notary seal. The black ink seeped into the paper fibers, forever sealing the fate of Ryan Prescott and my sister. Next, Harrison pushed forward a second, black velvet-covered folder. The resolution from the emergency shareholders meeting of Apex Dynamics Incorporated. This was my final masterpiece. As the anonymous majority shareholder, I used my absolute veto power without hesitation. I read the draft decision carefully. Ryan Prescott was not just being removed from his position as COO, he was being fired for cause, without severance, without insurance, and barred from receiving a letter of reference from any company under the corporate umbrella. His status in the banking world would be permanently locked on the credit bureau's blacklists. He wouldn't just be unable to become a director at another company or apply for a luxury mortgage. His name would be flatly rejected by the entire financial system for something as simple as financing a used car. Execute the asset liquidation brutally, right when they're at the altar tomorrow night, I commanded. My tone as cold as glacial ice, my voice echoing off the glass walls. Empty the penthouse on the Upper East Side that he bought illegally. Seize all the sports cars from the main garage. Block all door access. When they return from the party, make sure they find nothing but a padlocked iron gate and a suitcase of their cheap clothes lying on the asphalt. Yes, ma'am. The internal security team and court bailiffs are on standby. One more thing, I added, staring out at the metropolitan panorama. Have you arranged the purchase of that squalid property I requested? Harrison smiled faintly, a cold, professional smirk. Yes, ma'am. I have purchased a dilapidated shack in a slum area by the train tracks in Ryan Prescott's name. The purchase was made in cash. Without a broker. The shack is on marshy land, its walls are made of rotting plywood, and it's located directly across from an illegal garbage dump. I let out a small, dry laugh. Perfect. They need a legal address for the court's debt collection notices. Let Linda's arrogant body and Sarah's delicate skin get acquainted with the smell of the sewer every morning. I want them to realize just how pathetic it is to live as vagrants under the scorching sun. I left the notary's office feeling as light as a feather. The baby in my womb would not be born from the womb of a weak woman. He would inherit the throne from a mother who understood how to annihilate her enemies without getting her hands dirty. When I returned home for the last time, a stiff silence greeted me. I entered the stuffy guest room and stood before the mirror. The reflection still showed the faded floral house dress, my trusty disguise. The costume that made Linda feel she had the prerogative to insult me every morning and made my sister feel victorious for stealing a successful man. I traced the cheap fabric, remembering every insult they had hurled, thinking of me as just a parasite in their lives. They were so blind. I took a deep breath and let the dress fall from my body. It landed on the marble floor with a soft thud that seemed to shatter the shackles of my deception. With it, the identity of Amelia, the foolish, oppressed wife, crumbled. I stepped over to a secret compartment in my suitcase and pulled out an exclusive designer maternity gown in midnight blue, paired with a bone-white silk blazer that radiated pure aristocratic aura. I applied sharp makeup, styled my hair in an elegant updo, and wore a diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe watch. The woman staring back at me in the mirror was now the absolute ruler of a massive investment portfolio that supported the very company they worked for, the storm that would sweep away their arrogance. I put a few personal documents into a Rimowa cabin suitcase. I left nothing behind but emptiness in that room. While Sarah and Ryan were busy laughing at the altar tomorrow night, they would never realize that the floor they stood on was crumbling into the depths of financial hell. I pulled the handle of my suitcase, breaking the silence of the house. Before stepping out and closing the door for the last time, I glanced back once more. Goodbye, illusion. Tomorrow night, I will let them exchange their vows under the glittering crystal chandeliers of the ballroom. I will let Linda puff out her chest with pride. Then, at the peak of their euphoria, I will step in and read their social death sentence aloud. All the capital gains I would reap tomorrow would be directly proportional to their tears of despair. The names Ryan Prescott, Sarah Warren, and Linda Prescott would be erased from high society, their status changed to that of worthless, historical trash. The total annihilation has officially begun. The five-star hotel ballroom was transformed to resemble the Palace of Versailles, a perfect match for my sister's tacky obsession. A giant crystal chandelier cast a golden glow across the room, illuminating thousands of imported white roses that spread a cloyingly sweet, nauseating fragrance. On the grand, elevated stage, Ryan Prescott stood tall in an ivory tuxedo, holding the hand of Sarah, who was draped in her $100,000 silk gown. The cheap homewrecker smiled broadly, showing off her white teeth to the hundreds of high society guests, most of whom were business colleagues from my own company. In the front row sat Linda, wearing a brocade gown adorned with blinding sequins. A pearl necklace circled her neck, and her hands were busy showing off her fake Hermes bag to the other directors' wives. She was thoroughly enjoying her new role as the queen mother of a successful man. They were all reveling in an illusion, toasting with champagne bought with a toxic asset, a credit card that was about to tighten around their necks. Their laughter filled the air, celebrating a false victory over me, the parasite they believed they had successfully eliminated. They had no idea that a real asset liquidation was currently underway at their residence. 9 p.m. Time for the executioner to take the stage. The main ballroom doors, carved with gold, were pushed open wide by two security guards in black suits. The orchestral music, which had been playing softly, came to an awkward halt. 1,000 pairs of eyes turned in unison towards the entrance. I walked in with absolute calm. There was no faded house dress on my body. Tonight, I wore a designer cape dress from Paris in emerald green, which accentuated my pregnancy with the pure grace of an aristocrat. The low-heeled Bottega Veneta shoes I wore tapped softly but firmly on the thick red carpet. Around my neck was a diamond necklace whose value could buy all the tacky decorations in this room 10 times over. I did not come alone. To my right walked Harrison Vance, my iron-fisted corporate lawyer. Behind me, in a neat line, were 5 distinguished men in formal suits. They were the board of directors of Apex Dynamics Incorporated, the very executives Ryan had been desperately trying to impress for years. Whispers began to ripple through the ballroom. Ryan's arrogant smile slowly faded, his face turning pale, then flushing red with anger. Linda nearly choked on her drink. Sarah gripped her husband's arm, her face a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "Amelia! What are you doing here?" Ryan bellowed from the stage, his voice echoing through the microphone. shattering the awkward silence. He let go of Sarah's hand and stepped to the edge of the stage, pointing at me rudely. "Who let you in? You shameless woman! Did you come here to beg for pity?" Linda shot up from her seat and rushed towards me, her eyes glaring. "Hey, you crazy woman! Get out of here! How dare you ruin my son's happy day? You've been divorced. You were just a freeloader in our family. Security! Drag this parasite out of here right now!" Sarah joined in, screaming from the stage, feeling her position threatened. "Amelia, please, have some respect for us. Don't embarrass yourself. Ryan doesn't love you anymore. Accept the fact that you've lost." I stopped in the middle of the ballroom, about 15 feet from the stage. I looked at the three of them, one by one, then smiled faintly, a smile as cold as an Antarctic ice sheet. "Beg? Lost?" My voice wasn't loud, but its sharp, heavy intonation silenced the entire room. Harrison swiftly handed me a wireless microphone. I turned it on. "I didn't come here to beg, Ryan. I came to clean up the filth in my company." Ryan snorted, his laugh forced. "Your company? You're hallucinating, Amelia. You're just an unemployed housewife." I glanced behind me, giving a signal to Mr. Thompson, the chairman of the board of Apex Dynamics, whom Ryan had always known as his ultimate boss. Thompson took a step forward, looking at Ryan with an expression of utter disgust. "Watch your tone, Prescott," Thompson reprimanded, his baritone voice firm. "You are addressing Mrs. Amelia Warren, the absolute majority shareholder and rightful owner of the holding company that oversees Apex Dynamics Incorporated." A deathly silence choked the entire ballroom. 1,000 guests held their breath. Ryan Prescott's face turned ashen, as if all the blood had been drained from his body. Sarah's mouth hung open, while Linda stood frozen like a statue, her eyes wide with disbelief, staring at me from head to toe. "Yes, Ryan," I said slowly, chewing each word so it would sink into the pores of his arrogance. "That COO position you're so proud of? That was a gift from me. A gift to satisfy your pathetic male ego. This can't be. You're lying. This is all a trick," Ryan stammered, his body beginning to tremble on the stage. The magnificent tuxedo he wore now looked like an oversized clown costume. "A trick? Let's talk about tricks," I hissed, holding up the red folder for everyone to see. Inside this folder is a complete forensic audit report exposing your entire illegal auto-debit scheme. You stole company operational funds to buy my sister a $5.5 million penthouse. Gasps of shock erupted from the directors' wives at the front tables. Sarah's image as a high-class woman was obliterated in seconds. She covered her face with her trembling hands. "And as the majority shareholder, tonight I exercise my absolute veto power before the entire board of directors." I stared straight into Ryan's eyes, which now reflected pure terror. "Ryan Prescott, you are fired. For cause. Effective immediately. No severance, no letter of reference. And I have officially filed a civil lawsuit for $25 million in your name." The room erupted in a buzz of humiliating gossip, but not a single colleague dared to challenge my decision. "Amelia, you can't do this to us," Sarah wailed, her beautiful face now streaked with tears of fear. Her expensive gown could no longer hide the fact that she was just a parasite. "Shut your mouth, Sarah. You're nothing more than a cheap thief," I retorted coldly. "You're proud of that diamond necklace? Proud of this party? The bill for the credit card Ryan used to finance this circus will never be paid by my company. Your names have been submitted to every credit bureau. You are both officially bankrupt." Suddenly, Linda collapsed onto the red carpet, her legs no longer able to support her trembling body. Her fake Hermes bag fell to the floor. "Amelia, my dear, I'm sorry. I didn't know," she whimpered, her voice a pathetic, trembling plea as she tried to grab the hem of my shoe. I took a step back, avoiding her touch as if she were a contagious disease. "Don't touch me, Linda. You said I was a freeloader. Just so you know, the luxurious house you live in was bought with dividends from my personal portfolio, and right at this second, My security team is removing all of your junk from my house and Sarah's penthouse. The three of them had officially lost everything. Their illusion had been blown to smithereens. You thought you could throw me away like trash? You were dead wrong, I said, my voice thundering through the room, a final, unchallengeable verdict. The capital gains I reap tomorrow morning will not spare a single drop for you. Starting tonight, get ready to find a dilapidated shack by the train tracks. Get your lungs used to the smell of the sewer, because that is the only place fit for treacherous vagrants like you. In my life, you are nothing but historical trash that will soon be forgotten. Ryan fell to his knees on the stage. His financial and social ruin had occurred simultaneously, executed with merciless precision by the woman he had once deemed foolish and useless. I turned gracefully and looked at Harrison, who had been overseeing the execution. Harrison, I called with full authority. Execute the physical asset seizure. Now, just as I gave the instruction, the main ballroom doors opened again. A squad of corporate security officers and uniformed court bailiffs marched in with expressionless faces. They were ready to strip away all the jewelry and fleeting luxury still clinging to my enemies' bodies. Tonight, they would not be going home to a palace, but to the cold, hard streets. The steady march of the uniformed security officers and court bailiffs parted the crowd in the ballroom like the angel of death coming to collect souls. The hundreds of guests, directors, high-level managers, and business associates of Apex Dynamics now stared in horror at the magnificent stage. The romantic orchestral music was gone. All that remained was a suffocating silence and the choked sobs of my sister, the cheap homewrecker who was forced to swallow her own failure to become queen for a day. I stood with perfect posture, staring straight at the three pathetic humans trembling at my feet. The role of the foolish wife in a faded house dress was officially buried tonight. I was the executioner. Gentlemen, do your duty. The physical asset liquidation begins now, I ordered. My voice calm, but the certainty in my tone echoing with deadly finality throughout the room. The team of bailiffs moved swiftly up the stage steps. Ryan Prescott, my ex-husband who had been so arrogant and powerful when he handed me divorce papers, now stumbled backward, his steps weak and pathetic. Cold sweat drenched his forehead, ruining his slick, expensive hairstyle. His once sky-high ego was now shattered into a million pieces. Excuse me, Mr. Prescott. We have an official, unchallengeable seizure warrant from the commercial court, the head bailiff said in a flat baritone, shoving a document with a bright red seal in Ryan's face. Please hand over your wallet, all corporate credit cards, the Rolex watch on your wrist, and the keys to the sports car parked in the VIP basement. All of these items are now considered seized evidence in the $25 million civil suit. No! You can't do this to me! I'm the COO of this company! Ryan shrieked hysterically, his voice cracking, all his authority gone. He turned to me with a nauseatingly pleading look. Amelia, I'm begging you. Don't humiliate me in front of my colleagues. I promise I'll give it all back to you. I stepped forward calmly to the edge of the stage. Your colleagues, Ryan? Not anymore. I looked at him with an empty gaze, devoid of empathy. I have fired you for cause. Using my absolute veto power, you have no job, not a penny of severance, and your name is permanently on every credit bureau's blacklist. The sports car you so proudly drove here is registered to my personal holding company. The credit cards in your wallet? They are toxic assets whose bills will hunt you to your grave. Hand over those items now, or they will strip you bare right here. With hands trembling uncontrollably, Ryan took off his luxury watch and handed over his car keys and leather wallet. He had been completely stripped of every symbol of his masculine pride in front of the entire world. My attention then slowly shifted to Sarah. My sister was sobbing uncontrollably, clutching the arm of a now useless Ryan. The $100,000 white silk gown that draped her slender body now looked like an expensive shroud on a living corpse. Miss Sarah Warren, a female bailiff said, approaching her with an uncompromising expression. The diamond necklace, earrings, and bracelet you are wearing were purchased with embezzled corporate funds. Please remove them now. They are not yours. No, They're mine. Ryan bought them for me for my historic wedding day. Sarah shrieked, stumbling backward, desperately trying to cover her neck with her shaking hands. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and extreme panic. Amelia, you are a wicked woman. You are a cruel sister. You're already rich, so why are you still so heartless as to take my things? I let out a soft, cold laugh that sent a chill down the spine of anyone who heard it. Take your things? You're mistaken, Sarah. You consciously stole money from your own sister's company to finance your cheap lifestyle. You are a disgusting parasite who has been sucking my blood from the inside. Take off that jewelry yourself, or these court officers will remove it by force in front of all the colleagues you're trying to impress. Sarah wailed as two female officers held her arms and forcibly unclasped the multi-$100,000 diamond necklace from her neck. Its sparkle vanished into a plastic evidence bag, leaving Sarah's neck bare. She collapsed onto the wooden stage, mourning the loss of the instant wealth she had worshipped. At the bottom of the stage, Linda was still slumped on the red carpet. Her old face was as pale as a corpse. She was trying to hide her wrinkled hands under her brocade gown, but my eyes, the eyes of a forensic auditor trained to spot the smallest anomaly, could not be fooled. "Linda," I called out, my aristocratic tone a deep insult to her dignity. "That 2.4-carat gold bracelet on your right wrist, I know for a fact it was bought with leftover allowance money I provided through Ryan's account. Take it off." "Amelia, my child, this is the only thing I have left," my former mother-in-law wailed, her tears smudging the thick makeup on her face. The old woman who had insulted me every morning for wearing a house dress and accused me of being a freeloader was now crawling pathetically at my feet. "I'm an old woman, dear. Don't you pity your own mother? Where is your conscience?" "Conscience?" I hissed, sharp and without mercy. "Did you have a conscience when you blessed your son for divorcing his 8 months pregnant wife for a parasitic woman? You enjoyed delicious food from my plate, lived in a luxurious house from my investment portfolio, yet you proudly demeaned me every single day. Take off that bracelet, Linda. Your wealth is a lie." Linda cried hysterically as she removed her thick gold bracelet and handed it to an officer with trembling hands. Her prestige as a high society figure was gone. All the guests who had once respected her now looked at her with a mixture of disgust and nauseating pity. An announcement for all guests and hotel management. My voice boomed through the microphone again, dominating the room. "This wedding reception is officially canceled. All bills for catering, the rental of this magnificent hall, and the wedding gown worn by Miss Sarah Warren are the personal responsibility of Mr. Ryan Prescott. The hotel is welcome to collect directly from the pathetic man kneeling on the stage." Ryan looked up, his eyes wide with horror. "What? But the card! You said the transaction went through." "The card only delayed the clearing process to deliver the bill directly to your doorstep, Ryan," I answered with extreme cynicism. "You just incurred hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to this hotel tonight." The face of the hotel manager, who had been watching from the doorway, immediately turned ashen. He quickly signaled for the hotel security to surround the now bankrupt Ryan. My mission of revenge tonight was complete. I stepped back, elegantly adjusting my emerald cape dress. I didn't need to touch them physically to destroy their lives. Facts, numbers, and the law had done the job with brutal efficiency. "The three of you," I said one last time, looking at the pathetic pile of human flesh before me. "My security team has already locked the gates to the house. Your cheap clothes have been thrown onto the sidewalk. Go find a dilapidated shack in the darkest corner of the city tonight. From now on, the smell of the sewer is your new perfume. Enjoy your new life as worthless vagrants." Without waiting for a response from their gaping, desperate mouths, I turned around. The business colleagues and directors' wives automatically moved aside, parting from me as if in a sea of awe. My steps were firm and measured, leaving the room that was now filled with the coarse shouts of the hotel manager demanding payment from a bewildered Ryan. Trillions of dollars in capital gains would flow into my child's account tomorrow. Meanwhile, those three traitors were now officially relegated to the status of historical trash. Tonight, justice had been served with the cruelest financial precision in the world, and I, Amelia Warren, walked away with an absolute, undeniable victory. The night air of the city felt refreshingly cool as I stepped out of the five-star hotel lobby. The burden of my charade was gone. My role as the helpless, submissive woman in a faded house dress was dead and buried forever inside that building. Tonight, I breathed as the absolute ruler, the executioner who had just severed the jugular of my enemy's pride. Behind me, I could faintly hear the humiliating commotion from the main ballroom. Ryan Prescott, the arrogant ex-husband, was being forcibly interrogated by the hotel manager and security for failing to pay his wedding bill, which ran into the hundreds of thousands. The corporate credit card he had always flaunted to belittle me had officially become a toxic asset, now locking his neck in an endless grip of instant debt. I slipped into the back cabin of a jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom that was waiting for me in the VIP driveway. My personal chauffeur bowed respectfully, while Harrison sat in the front passenger seat, opening his tablet to display a live feed from the hotel's security cameras. "They've just been violently ejected from the hotel, Mrs. Warren," Harrison reported in his flat, professional baritone. "The management confiscated Mr. Prescott's luxury phone and remaining valuables as temporary collateral. Miss Warren and Mrs. Prescott were forced to follow him on foot under the scornful eyes of the other guests. They are now trying to hail a cheap taxi, as no premium car service will pick up people who look like criminals." "Excellent," I replied coldly, my eyes glued to the tablet screen, watching their downfall in real time. "Take us to the main residence now. I want to witness their expressions firsthand when they realize they have truly become homeless tonight." My luxury car glided smoothly through the dark Jakarta streets, heading towards the elite neighborhood where my palace stood. Inside my head, the numbers never stopped spinning. The dividends from my stock portfolio today were skyrocketing exponentially, generating fantastic capital gains. Every dollar that flowed into my account felt directly proportional to the absolute suffering being experienced by those three disgusting parasites. 20 minutes later, my car stopped smoothly under the shade of a large oak tree, directly across the street from the massive iron gates of my home. The 1-2-foot-high gates were now padlocked with a thick steel chain that was impossible to break. On the sidewalk outside, 5 large black plastic trash bags were piled up. This was the result of the first phase of physical asset liquidation, executed by my security team, all their cheap clothes, Linda's imitation goods, and the rest of their worthless junk. All the branded items and jewelry bought with embezzled funds had been neatly seized, bagged, and sent to the commercial court's vault. A moment later, a rickety, faded taxi screeched to a halt in front of the gate. Ryan got out first, his face ashen like a walking corpse. His ivory tuxedo was now dirty and stained with the sweat of fear. He was followed by Sarah, the cheap homewrecker, who struggled to lift her $100,000 silk gown, now torn at the hem from being dragged across the rocky pavement. Behind them, Linda hobbled out, with no trace left of the high society arrogance she always flaunted while insulting me. Ryan stumbled towards the gate, shaking the solid iron bars in desperation. "Open up! Open the door now! Who dares to lock up my house?" he screamed, his voice shattering the night's silence. Of course, no guard came to open the gate for him. The grand house was dark and silent. I had taken full remote control of its security system. Sarah collapsed onto the cold sidewalk, wailing when she realized the black trash bags in front of her contained her old, cheap clothes. The illusion of grandeur she had built by stealing her sister's happiness had been razed to the ground. Harrison opened my car door and crossed the street with the authority of a merciless legal executioner. His appearance made Ryan and Linda shrink back in fear. "Good evening, Mr. Prescott," Harrison greeted, his voice freezing their blood. He pulled out a thick brown envelope and tossed it onto the pile of trash bags. "That is the official copy of your civil lawsuit, complete with the forensic audit details of the financial crimes you have committed for years. And inside that envelope is a rusty key and a map to your new residence." "A key? What do you mean?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling as he picked up the envelope like a starving beggar fighting over scraps. "Where are my family and I supposed to stay tonight? I am a former director. You are nobody in this city anymore. Harrison cut in sharply. That key is for your new home. Mrs. Warren, in her remaining kindness, has arranged to rent a dilapidated shack by the train tracks for the three of you. Only that squalid place would accept individuals whose identities are now permanently blocked by every credit bureau. Linda shrieked hysterically, beating her own chest until she coughed. A shack! I refuse to live in a filthy shack. Amelia, where are you, you ungrateful child? How dare you treat your own mother-in-law like a stray animal? We are your family, the old woman who had acted like a queen for decades wailed. I slowly pressed the button, lowering the black-tinted window of my car. The smooth purr of the V12 engine was a stark contrast to their desperate screams. I looked at them from the comfort of my premium leather seat. Family? My voice glided out, as cold as glacial ice. Family doesn't suck each other's blood dry. The three of you are just a collection of greedy parasites that happen to attach to a branch of my tree. Now, that tree has forcibly cut off your nutrients. My eyes sharpened, piercing straight into Ryan's retina, which was filled with despair. Enjoy your new palace. Get your rotten lungs used to breathing in the pungent smell of the sewer every morning, and don't you ever dare to show your disgusting faces again. Amelia, help me! Sarah crawled on the asphalt towards my car, her smeared makeup making her look like a terrifying, crying clown. I'm your sister. Amelia, I promise I'll leave Ryan tonight, but please don't let me become a street bum. My sister died the moment you chose to sleep with my husband in a bed that I bought with my money. I hissed. Without a single crack for forgiveness, I pressed the button again, and the window rose, sealing them out of my world forever. Drive now, I commanded my chauffeur. The luxury car pulled away slowly, leaving behind screams and a pile of misery on the elite sidewalk. From this moment on, their role in my life was over. They were officially demoted to historical trash, not even worthy of being remembered. I had delivered a complete financial annihilation, and I was now heading towards my throne, leaving the traitors to rot in the hell of poverty they had dug for themselves. The morning sun refused to offer its warmth to a slum area on the outskirts of the city, by the train tracks. There stood a semi-permanent structure whose plywood walls were rotten with termites and stained with black mold. Inside that dilapidated shack sat three human figures who, just last night, had been dreaming of conquering the world. Ryan Prescott, Sarah Warren, and Linda Prescott now sat frozen on the cold dirt floor, staring blankly at the black plastic trash bags containing their worn-out clothes. The air was thick with the stench of the sewer, which evaporated from a black, murky ditch right in front of the door. The rotten smell aggressively assaulted their lungs, forcing Linda to cover her nose with the hem of her brocade gown, now a dingy gray from sidewalk dust. The status-obsessed old woman cried ceaselessly, her throat dry from a night of wailing over her new fate as a directionless vagrant. In a cramped, stuffy corner, Sarah sat hugging her trembling knees. The $100,000 French silk gown she wore was now torn at the bottom, sullied by mud and city dust. The cheap homewrecker shivered, her body refusing to accept reality. The illusion of instant luxury she had flaunted was gone, leaving only the brutal truth that she was a failed parasite. She stared at the corrugated tin roof, full of holes, in horror. There was no air conditioning. No servants bringing breakfast on a silver tray. No high-class life. This is all your fault. Ryan. Sarah suddenly shrieked, her hoarse voice shattering the suffocating silence. She pointed a finger at Ryan's face, who was slumped on a bamboo cot. You said you were a successful director. You said that mansion was yours. If I had known you were just a low-level employee freeloading off your stupid wife, I never would have wasted my youth on you. Ryan slowly lifted his face. Dark circles ringed his eyes, his jaw tight with explosive anger. His once towering male ego had nowhere left to hide. Watch your cheap mouth, Sarah. Who do you think bought you those diamonds and designer bags? You were the one who kept whining for luxury, non-stop. You spent millions of company money with that damned auto-debit system. Because of your greed, Amelia slapped me with a $25 million lawsuit. Enough, both of you! Linda shrieked, beating her own chest, which ached with pain. You are both stupid and useless. Ryan, I don't care how you do it. You have to go out and find a loan. Meet with your business colleagues. Don't let your mother rot in this garbage dump. I am a lady. I don't deserve to breathe the same air as these sewer rats. Ryan rubbed his face roughly, his eyes filled with absolute despair. Earlier that morning, he had already tried his luck. He had walked 2 miles to a grimy internet cafe to access his network, but karma worked faster and harder than he had anticipated. All his banking access was locked tight. His name was permanently emblazoned in red on every credit bureau's blacklist. Every time he tried to call a former colleague who had once flattered him, the call was instantly rejected. Amelia hadn't just fired him. She had distributed the forensic audit of his crimes to the entire corporate network. Ryan was now recognized as historical trash in the business world, a civil fugitive no company would even consider for a janitor position. The hands that once signed multi-million-dollar checks now trembled with hunger, far from the despair consuming that squalid shack. On the 60th floor of a skyscraper in the heart of the business district, Amelia Warren stood with perfect grace. Behind the bulletproof glass walls of her CEO's office, she held a porcelain cup of warm chamomile tea, gazing at the metropolitan panorama spread below her like a giant chessboard she had already won. There was no trace of the hurt woman in a cheap house dress. Her posture was perfectly erect, her aura radiating the absolute power of an heir to a throne. On the black marble desk behind her lay a tablet displaying a feed from a hidden surveillance camera. Harrison had ensured the rented shack was equipped with a mini audio-visual device before her enemies arrived. Our portfolio report this morning is very satisfying, Mrs. Warren, said Harrison, who stood tall reading the data. The market has responded very positively to the board reshuffle. Our stock jumped 5% at the market opening today, generating a capital gain of hundreds of millions. At the same time, the late fees on the toxic asset credit card debt tied to Ryan Prescott's name continued to compound mercilessly. Amelia sipped her tea slowly. She glanced at the tablet, which showed Sarah screaming in terror as a centipede crawled near her shoe. Amelia's eyes showed not a flicker of pity. They were just a collection of parasites reaping the fruits of their own greed. Send a copy of the court-ordered debt collection notice to their shack's address every week, Harrison, Amelia commanded, her tone as cold as glacial ice. Make sure the courier delivers it right when they're boiling their last packet of instant noodles. I want those collection notices to be a supplementary course of suffering they must swallow every day. Also, ensure my veto power closes any loophole for pro bono legal aid for that traitor. Orders will be executed perfectly, ma'am. In the stuffy shack, Linda's delusion became the last defense for her cracking sanity. Amelia will come for us, the old woman mumbled, hugging her knees, her gaze vacant. She's just angry for now. Tomorrow, her driver will come with the luxury car. She refused to accept that the daughter-in-law she had tormented daily had now become her financial grim reaper. Meanwhile, starvation forced Sarah to abandon her pride. The former belle took off her imitation earrings, intending to sell them at a flea market. But as she stepped outside, a group of neighboring women stared at her with disgust. The news of the corrupt director and the cheap homewrecker had spread even to the slums. There was no sympathy for a fallen thief, only spits of hatred. Amelia smiled faintly, watching the social degradation recorded on her screen. She gently caressed her belly. The child in her womb would inherit a clean, untouchable empire. Justice doesn't work through tears. Justice works through numbers and absolute execution, leaving the traitors to devour each other until they become the dust of civilization. 2 weeks had passed since the gavel of financial justice had fallen without mercy. In a creaking shack, battered by the coastal night winds, a living hell had completely taken over. There was no trace of arrogance left on Ryan Prescott's gaunt face. The former pseudo-director was huddled in a corner, sitting on a thin, moldy mat, clutching a stomach twisted by chronic hunger. The humid night air seeped through the cracks in the termite-eaten plywood walls, carrying the thick stench of the sewer mixed with wet garbage, which had become the daily oxygen for lungs once accustomed to central air conditioning. Across the dimly lit room, Linda lay weakly on a rickety bamboo cot. Her wrinkled skin was covered in an itchy red rash, a result of the heavy metal-contaminated well water they were forced to use. Her once glamorous brocade gown had become a filthy rag. The status-obsessed woman who had belittled her daughter-in-law for wearing a house dress was now nothing more than a piece of flesh awaiting a humiliating death, she muttered incessantly, blaming cruel fate and the weather, but her stubborn ego refused to blame her own greed. Extreme poverty is the perfect solvent for a love built on a foundation of material lies. In the corner of a kitchen with no stove, Sarah stared at her reflection in a cracked piece of mirror she had salvaged from a dumpster. Her once beautiful face, which used to receive million-dollar treatments, was now dull and oily, with dark circles and chapped lips. The cheap homewrecker had finally reached the end of her sanity. The grand illusion of winning the true love of a successful man had been shattered. Ryan Prescott was no Prince Charming. The man trembling in the corner was nothing more than a leech that had lost its host. With stealthy movements, Sarah began stuffing her remaining dirty clothes into a large black plastic bag. She packed a few pieces of imitation jewelry that had escaped the initial seizure. She had made up her mind. She was leaving tonight. To stay another night in this disgusting, foul-smelling place was a slow suicide. "Where are you going, Sarah?" Ryan's hoarse, dry voice suddenly broke the suffocating silence, stopping Sarah at the threshold of the rotting wooden door. Ryan stood up with difficulty, leaning against the fragile wall. His once erect body, always clad in custom suits, was now skeletal. For the past 12 days, he had tried to swallow his pride and apply for manual labor jobs, but his blacklisted banking status and his civil criminal record made every foreman reject him with disgust. His identity had been cruelly manipulated by his ex-wife into a contagious, toxic asset. Sarah turned, her eyes filled with a sharp hatred and a revulsion she no longer tried to hide. "I'm getting out of this hellhole. I'm sick of looking at your pathetic, useless face, Ryan. You told my mother you were rich, a great director. In reality, you're just a poor liar who was freeloading off the blood and sweat of my own sister." "Watch your cheap mouth, Sarah!" Ryan roared, the veins in his neck bulging. He lunged forward and grabbed Sarah's arm roughly. "Who do you think bought you all those diamonds and designer bags? You were the one who kept begging for luxury like a pauper. You were the one who pushed me to make those illegal transfers. Because of your bottomless greed, Amelia filed a $25 million lawsuit and bankrupted me to my very core. Let go of me, you bastard!" Sarah shrieked, struggling wildly and scratching the back of Ryan's hand, leaving bleeding gashes. "I deserved all that luxury. My face and my body are my assets. And you? You're just a dumb parasite who is useless without the money from your genius ex-wife. You talk about true love? Don't make me laugh. I only loved your money and your lifestyle. And now you can't even buy me a cheap burger. Checkmate." Sarah's venomous words struck Ryan's masculine ego right at its core. The narcissistic, manipulative man who had always seen himself as the center of the universe was slapped hard by the harshest reality. The woman he had defended so fiercely, the woman for whom he had divorced his pregnant wife, was nothing more than an opportunistic parasite, ready to jump to another tree the moment her branch broke. The commotion finally woke Linda. The old woman rose with her last ounce of strength, her eyes glaring at Sarah. Her pent-up anger, hunger, and frustration finally found an outlet. "You venomous snake!" Linda shrieked, lunging at Sarah and brutally yanking her long hair. "This is all your fault! If you hadn't seduced my son, we would still be living comfortably in that marble-lined mansion. You came to ruin our happiness. Because of your cheap charms, my daughter-in-law liquidated everything and threw us in this dump. Get your wrinkled hands off me, you crazy old hag!" Sarah screamed back, pushing Linda's chest with all her might. The old woman was thrown backward, hitting the corner of the bamboo cot hard. Linda groaned in extreme pain, clutching her bruised hip. But Sarah didn't care. Her animalistic survival instinct had taken over. She spat on the dirt floor in front of Ryan and his groaning mother. You two fools deserve to rot in this place for the rest of your lives. Enjoy your remaining breaths as historical trash. I refuse to sink with your rotten ship. Sarah turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness of the muddy alley, leaving Ryan on his knees, lamenting his own stupidity, while Linda's hysterical cries of pain echoed like a death melody in the dead of night. Far from this disgusting scene of social and moral cannibalism, in a soundproof, minimalist chic office downtown, Amelia Warren stared at her dual monitors with absolute calm. The live feed from the high-resolution surveillance cameras installed by her security team displayed every detail of the brutal fight in real time. Amelia twirled a gold pen between her fingers. Her expression as cold as marble. There was no triumphant smile. No cynical laughter. For her, watching her enemies tear each other apart was merely the factual confirmation of a mathematical hypothesis she had designed from the start. They're really eating each other alive like starving dogs, ma'am. Harrison's firm baritone voice came through the intercom. Miss Sarah Warren is currently tracked on a vegetable truck heading to another outskirts town. Should our security team intercept her for further asset seizure? Let her run, Harrison, Amelia replied flatly, her eyes shifting to the second screen, which showed the rising green curve of her investment portfolio's massive capital gains. She's running with no cash and no clean financial identity. She'll just end up selling herself in a low-class brothel. Natural selection will finish the job for us in a far crueler way. As the absolute controller of her corporate network, Amelia had sealed their futures without leaving a single opening. The precise record of the forensic audit had permanently chained them in the eyes of corporate law. The cold-blooded executioner, moving unseen in the shadows, had delivered the ultimate penalty, leaving their vital organs functioning while stripping them of all human dignity. Amelia moved her mouse and turned off the monitor displaying the shack, cutting off her view of those pathetic humans for the night. Focus all our legal resources on the auction of Ryan Prescott's remaining assets scheduled for tomorrow morning at the commercial court. And make sure the debt collection notices, with maximum interest, pile up at that shack's door every single day, without fail, Amelia commanded, her tone ending all further discussion. True revenge, in the end, was not about physical violence. The most perfect, elegant revenge was when you successfully demolished the entire foundation of your enemy's self-worth, using the instruments of law, then sat comfortably on your throne, merely watching them rip each other to shreds to survive. The remaining breaths of Ryan and Linda in that squalid place were just a reminder that in this world, karma always has its own shadow executioner, and Amelia Warren had played that role to absolute perfection. Police sirens tore through the quiet dawn in the slum by the train tracks, shredding a peace that never existed. That day, the city sky was a dull, heavy gray, as if refusing to show mercy to the inhabitants of the shack who had lived in a lie. Ryan Prescott, the arrogant man who had once boasted about his custom suits while demeaning his wife for her simple house dress, was now being forcibly dragged out by 3 police officers. The hands that once manipulated numbers and signed illegal auto-debit documents were now tightly cuffed in cold steel. Ryan's body struggled weakly, his bare feet dragging through the mud. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with absolute terror as an officer read him his rights, charging him with money laundering and corporate asset manipulation. The $25 million civil suit from his ex-wife had mutated into a multi-count felony conviction that would see him rot behind bars. He was finished. All his masculine ambitions were crushed under the combat boots of the officers guiding him into the patrol car. At the threshold of the rotting wooden door, Linda could only crawl weakly on the muddy ground, wailing as she watched her son being taken away. Her tears mixed with the dirt on her wrinkled cheeks. The old woman who had always felt entitled to her daughter-in-law's wealth was now left completely alone. Sarah, the homewrecker, was long gone. Linda was officially a destitute, homeless woman with no dignity left. Her lungs were forced to adapt to the pungent black sewer stench from the ditch in front of her shack. It was nature's punishment for a parasite that had been too greedy. She was left to rot, with nothing but hunger. The existence of all 3 of them was officially buried alive, forever branded as the most disgusting historical trash. Far from the stench of poverty consuming that treacherous family, a new life was being welcomed with absolute luxury. On the top floor of the most elite private hospital in the heart of the city, Amelia Warren rested calmly in a VVIP maternity suite designed to resemble a five-star penthouse. The contrast was staggering. While her enemies breathed the air of a drainage ditch, Amelia inhaled air from a high-grade purification system scented with calming lavender. Amelia had just gone through a smooth delivery, attended by the best team of specialist doctors. She had given birth to a healthy baby boy whose cries were strong and loud. The baby was now sleeping soundly, in a gold-inlaid incubator in the corner of the room, completely unaware that he had just been born, not merely as a son, but as the sole heir to an untouchable business empire. The aristocratic woman gazed out the giant glass window at the metropolitan panorama pulsating under her command. Amelia's face radiated a cold, calculated, and merciless satisfaction. There was not a shred of pity left in her heart for the man who had contributed the chromosome to her baby. Amelia, the mastermind of their destruction, had proven that true justice never falls from the sky. It must be designed, calculated, and executed through numbers, legal power, and financial strategy. She had cast off the role of the docile woman and evolved perfectly into the executioner who held absolute power over her enemy's very oxygen. A soft knock preceded the opening of the mahogany VVIP suite door. Harrison Vance stepped in. The iron-fisted corporate lawyer wore a precisely tailored black suit, radiating undeniable legal authority. He bowed deeply before Amelia, carrying a black leather folder containing the final conclusion of their financial war. "Good morning, Mrs. Warren. I bring conclusive news that will perfect your position today," Harrison greeted, in his baritone voice. "As per the asset liquidation scenario you ordered, Ryan Prescott was officially detained at dawn on multiple charges. All his requests for bail have been flatly denied by the district attorney's office. Through our banking interventions, his name has been permanently locked on every credit bureau's blacklist." Amelia turned slowly from the window, her gaze as sharp as a scalpel. "And what about the phantom assets he was so proud of, Harrison? Have all the penalty interest charges started to accrue?" she asked, her calm tone signaling the authority of an apex predator. "Completely leveled, ma'am," Harrison reported, pointing to a row of bolded numbers. "All debts, with compounding interest, have been charged to Ryan Prescott's name. Because he used the credit card you turned into a toxic asset. The interest multiplies weekly. He is not just an ordinary prisoner. He is a debt slave for life. And even his prison wages will be automatically garnished." Amelia nodded slowly, absorbing the information like a beautiful classical symphony. "As for Linda Prescott," Harrison continued flatly, "the old woman is now truly living on the streets. She survives on scraps, begging from the same people she once arrogantly looked down upon. And your sister, Sarah Warren. Our internal intelligence reports she has been trapped by a loan shark syndicate on the North Coast after failing to use a fake ID. She is now a prisoner of street thugs. All three of them were systematically destroyed by their own parasitic nature." "Very satisfying," Amelia hissed, her voice like a bone-chilling wind. She glanced at the final forensic audit report and the court documents on the marble nightstand. Those stamped papers were the physical manifestation that betrayal could never defeat structural intelligence. Using her absolute veto power on the board, Amelia had wiped the deadly pests from her life without soiling her hands with physical violence. She had assassinated their characters with the law and impoverished their souls with the banking system. Amelia slowly turned her gaze to the baby boy still sleeping in the luxurious glass incubator. That small creature was her future, the only human with the legitimacy to enjoy the trillions of dollars in capital gains from her global investment portfolio. The baby would never know the biological father who was a petty embezzler, nor the greedy grandmother who had traded her conscience for a fake handbag. This child would grow up under the magnificent shadow of a mother who understood how to turn the axis of the world, a strong woman who refused to be a victim of a manipulative man. That morning, amidst the splendor of the VVIP suite, Bathed in the golden light reflected from the city's skyscrapers, Amelia Warren celebrated her absolute freedom in silence. She let her enemies rot slowly in the earthly hell they had dug for themselves, forever trapped in the endless shackles of poverty and humiliation. For them, there would never be forgiveness, never a second chance to breathe easy. The justice of the shadow executioner had been served with perfect, cruel, elegant, and merciless finality. The story of those cheap traitors was officially closed and sealed shut, leaving only the sole heir who would one day reign at the top of the hierarchy, looking down from his throne, forever untouchable by any pathetic creature.